So I'd like to introduce Jeff Blanchard, and he'll introduce others on the team to talk about what we've done in this space.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. We're really honored to be here tonight, especially at this very important inflection point for the college, after years of growing and changing. And we hope that the work we've done over the last several months will be helpful for you. My name is Jeff Blanchard. I'm the Director of Product Design behind Solutions, and with me tonight is Florence McCaffrey. She's a UX designer and researcher. Not with us tonight is David Whiting. He's our Director of Customer Experience, and he's on vacation this week. He sends his regards. So we're here tonight to talk about digital experience strategy. Thank you for the introduction again, Craig. And so we might ask, why have a digital experience strategy? Why do we need this if we're going to be doing really conscientious design and creation of technology? We started with three things we wanted to uncover, three things we wanted to address. Constituents expect a certain kind of experience, even if they're unable to articulate it. So if we think about students coming to CLC, their expectations of the world, including technology they use, is formed by experiences they have every day, whether it's ordering something on Amazon, calling a Lyft, or the tablets they use in high school. So they bring those expectations with them. Organizations like CLC want to focus their limited resources on building the right things. So not just building technology because it's convenient, but because it's actually meaningful, impactful. And siloed organizations, which higher institutions, higher learning institutions, they be from time to time, need something to organize around before they build something. So what we're asked to do, our objectives, were to start by focusing on the website, as Greg mentioned, which is perceived as being too broad in content and addressing too many audiences, which can make it difficult to navigate and can diminish its value. Meanwhile, the CLC portal lacks a clear purpose and doesn't offer significant value once students start using it once on campus. And lastly, the website, the portal, and the mobile app, LMS, and Student Center, and other tools, when taken together as a collection, often create a disparate and fragmented user experience. So we wanted to look at that collection as a whole, and we looked at about 50 different products across the landscape to see when they're surfacing the student experience. And in the end, we wanted to understand how we could create a digital ecosystem which is personalized, anticipates the needs of students and other constituents, contains discrete systems that work together seamlessly, and creates effortless flow between their digital and physical lives. As I mentioned before, we focused primarily on these tools, but we looked at other tools as well. We tried to understand the experience that students were having with these along their journey here. We wanted to be conscious of what kind of outcomes we were thinking about. So if we're building new technologies or revising technologies, why are we doing that? Well, we want to increase enrollment and completion, of course, reduce complexity and barriers to success, increase accessibility and equity, improve the emotional experience where possible, and enable staff and faculty to guide and enable their experience.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So again, I'm Florence McCaffrey, UX researcher and designer, also at Highland. So when we started the research here, the question we were trying to answer is what experience are constituents currently having across the CLC digital landscape, and how is it contributing to their success? So there's these three methodologies or theories along the bottom that I think that you may hear a lot in the future, so I just want to cover them very quickly. Jobs to be done, that's kind of the study of motivations and goals of students and their ability to achieve those goals or make progress. Customer journeys, that's a macro view of a student's entire journey throughout their time at CLC, and that can be an emotional journey as well as process journeys, and we did both, and you'll be seeing some of that. User experience, that's more of a micro lens of the experience that a student is going through as they use the various specific tools on campus to get their work done. So we started off talking to a lot of people. We did student interviews, we talked to staff and faculty, we reviewed over 50 digital products, and we explored the campuses. And what we found were these incredible stories from all of these students that we spoke to. And we created journey maps to create kind of a visualization of those stories. The three journey maps we built are traditional for-credit student journey, the non-traditional for-credit student, and the not-for-credit constituent. In this case, we focused on the WPI student. We recognize that there are other constituencies not represented here, such as personal enrichment and adult ed, but this was what we were we weren't able to connect with enough students to create a journey that we would be really confident in. So we stuck to these 3 kind of primary journeys. So I'm going to walk you briefly through these journeys and what we learned talking to these students. So these conversations I had with students were about an hour long, maybe a little over an hour. Were incredible experience to listen to what these students went through at CLC. So this first one is the traditional 4-credit students journey. And the students started out in kind of 2 different places. Some were kind of like, I always knew I'd come to CLC, and here I am, and I'm excited about it. And then other students said things like, I had expected better for myself. I feel left out because all my friends are going to 4-year schools, and they felt more negative about being at CLC. But despite the fact that they were starting at those 2 different places, they very quickly got to a place where things started to become similar. And that was when they started to feel this complete lack of self-confidence, a lot of self-doubt, just feeling unsure, is college really for me? Can I do this? Can I succeed here? And so those students, as they're experiencing that, they're making themselves really small, they're not speaking up in class, they're not asking for help. They're just kind of going through the day-to-day of going to class, going home, doing their assignments, and really not getting any joy from it. But for all of the students I spoke to, there was this really interesting turning point where kind of just by happenstance, whether it is because they found themselves at an event hosted by a student group that they later became involved in, or for many of them, they had crises outside of CLC that caused them to ask for help when before they would not have. If they were in a position that was hard enough for them, they were kind of forced to ask for help. And that was a turning point because suddenly they realized CLC is here for me, they care for me, and I am supported to continue here. And that is when the experience totally changed. Students felt really good about being on campus, about going to class, started to ask for help, started to go to tutoring, things like that. And their journey from there just kind of got better and better. Along the bottom here, this is really kind of the backbone of the journey. These are the chapters. So every time I spoke to a student, I would ask them at the end of our conversation, they would tell me their whole story. And then I would say, okay, pretend now that this story you just told me is a storybook, and break it into chapters. So that's where those chapters are from, which are kind of showing the passage of time through the student's journey. And then one other thing about this journey is that self-efficacy bar. Like I said, students coming in, starting off with this idea of, I don't know if I can do this. I've never done something like this before. This is really scary. But by the time that they're leaving CLC, they have a totally different attitude. An attitude that is full of excitement and full of self-confidence. Students were saying things to me like, I'm ready, I can do this, let's go. Whatever is next, I can do it. So I'm going to just more briefly touch on these other 2 journeys. This is the non-traditional 4-credit students journey. And the shape of this journey is very similar, although the context is a bit different. So these students are older, they've been out of a class environment for a long time, some of them, and they are, again, kind of, the self-doubt is there, but it's really around, is this the right time for me to go to CLC or not? And there's kind of a lot of going back and forth, trying to decipher, is this the right time? Can I really do this? What am I signing up for? Am I going to have the time for that between, kids and jobs and all the other things that adults have to care about? And there is a turning point for these students as well, which is when they talk to somebody who is very knowledgeable at CLC, often a faculty advisor, and that individual is able to break this big cloud of college, this kind of cloud of uncertainty, into these discrete steps. And that is a turning point because the student realizes, okay, I can do this. This is just a series of steps. This isn't some big ambiguous thing that I have to figure out on my own. CLC is here for me, and I'm going to take the plunge and start school. And then lastly, the WPDI journey. The most interesting thing that I learned from talking to these students was that the vast majority of the journey here is the amount of time and energy it took for students to register for class, starting with applying and then registering. And then that kind of the darker gray band there, that's the actual, that moment when they're actually in class. And finally, after all that work that they've done, all that effort to register for class, finally they receive the value that came from all of that work. So I'll pass it off to Jeff now to talk about the process maps.
Thanks, Florence. Yeah, so this idea of the exchange of value is really important to us. When we do process mapping, and this is the 4-credit traditional students process map, we think about what is the express journey that students are going through, and then what's the reality of the things that they have to do necessarily because of how the organization has been built, how the different tools have been built. What are the different processes they have to go through to get from A to B, get from beginning to end? And where are they putting out effort, where are they putting out energy, time, money, information, what have you? And when are they getting value back from that system? So there's a lot going on here, so don't expect you to absorb this, but this is just to illustrate just the sheer amount of things that students are asked to do. And this is an environment, of course, that they've never been in before. So the things that they have to do are not always clear to them. And there's a lot of opportunities for failure. And if we think about this as a separate layer cake, beneath that we have the different tools and the different staff members and faculty members that they interact with over time. So throughout the course of that journey, different products are showing up that are either enabling them or sometimes getting in the way of them moving ahead. So we want to be cognizant of all the details and the connection points and the pathways of information from one source to another, and when that can get broken. And then furthermore, beneath that, what are the systems and the staff that are operating behind the scenes that are building up these mechanisms that students are using but that they may never see? So all the different platforms and the back of house staff, if you will, that are necessarily involved in the creation of this, even though the student may never see them. With all this behind us, we can start to ask ourselves, how can we make a change to the system? We understand the details, the inflection points, the challenges. Where can we start to dive in and have an impact? And so some of the recommendations we have are these. First, we want to acknowledge there's been a lot of great work done with the Lancer Success Framework that Dr. Sudek and others have put out in front of us. It is very journey-like in its design, which is amazing. A lot of colleges have not done this. And we see here the student journey, or one articulation of the student journey beneath that. What we want to do is align those, bring those side by side, pay attention to the intentions that are put out there by the framework, and then ask ourselves, what are the realities of the journey? What's the expressed, the real-life experience of the students as they try to get through that journey? And where can we find ways to connect the framework and the intention with the realities of their experience? So we suggest creating cross-discipline teams aligned around the journey with tools for listening within the various stages who are empowered to make change. Another way to visualize this is to think about the outside-in perspective. So students, members of the community, other people, different partners are around CLC trying to gain access, trying to find out how they can participate. And so they're continuously broadcasting, if we're listening, different expressions of need. And those, of course, who are available to hear that need are those who are on the front lines, who are interacting on a daily basis with those students. So we need to create mechanisms and channels to allow those people to communicate inward to those who are responsible for governing and designing this system so that they can create a healthy and sustainable platform. So that's the big picture. And where we could start is by coming back to the portal and the website. So this is the beginning and the end of the experience for a lot of people. If we think about bracketing that journey, that longitudinal journey, and you see here we've added life to the framework, because life goes on after CLC, but there's still more time and opportunity to participate, right? We can see that the website could be most valuable at the bookends of that, whereas in the middle, the portal can really show up and provide the means of understanding the pathways to success, the guidance, the moments to find support, and to see the path in front of them that may be otherwise opaque. And so if we focus on the website and make the emphasis on discovery, on evaluating what CLC offers, on enabling the recruitment team to be more effective, on raising public awareness, expressing the brand, and asking for support for the college from donors and others, we can then shift our attention on the portal to the pathways and guidance. So completing enrollment, getting through orientation and setting goals, understanding how to get connected and find support, evaluating the progress along the way, and seeing their goal ahead of them and the path to completion. And so we want to imagine a future where we're not just putting information in front of students, but actually crystallizing it into a form that they can see is relevant to them and addresses their unique stories. And with that, if we've got time, we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay. Good. Question? You know, trustee Hall is asking, what's the implementation for this?
Great question. So yeah, this is phase 1. And let me skip ahead here. We have another, I believe. Oh, no, I didn't get in here. But so phase 2 will look like first identifying, doing a deeper dive into what the portal could become, because the portal could become many things. There are a lot of people out here who have done different studies on what is most important to students at different points in time. And as an example, there is a CLC app today, but that app is also not unlike the existing portal. So it's a bunch of links. So we need to take it another step into that and ask students, okay, you have this portal now. This new portal could be built for you. What would it do? What would it help you do that's most important to you when you first get to college? And then as you first talk to your advisor and you first go to class. And we listen for those indications of need, and we can start to arrange those and prioritize those. Once we understand what needs it is we need to respond to using that product, we can then change our attention to what are the realities of the digital tools that are out there. Are there platforms we could build on? Do we need to build this from scratch? Probably not. What would integrate with PeopleSoft and other tools that are here? And how can we start to actually integrate this with the tools that already exist? So once we have that identified, that would be part A, if you will, of phase 2. Part B would be say, okay, now that the portal has some legs, what can we extract from the website, place that into the portal that's really about student life, active student life. So again, the website today addresses many different audiences, including active students. We think that the best thing to do is to take the information that is for active students and shift that into the portal where it's more relevant to them. In there we can also personalize that and present information at the right time.
Greg, can you give some insight
Yeah,
to
so
timeline?
what Jeff was describing there is what we're calling the design phase, and that will probably start in the November timeframe and go through the end of the fiscal year. And then we'll begin an implementation phase, probably July 1st or soon thereafter, where we'll start taking those changes and making them happen. One of the challenges we have, and I was just talking to Aaron Fowles today about this challenge, is that's a full year from now. And there are some things we need to do in the website now, and we'll have to find the balance between putting in some quick fixes that may not have a long life but are necessary in order to help students navigate the site better, with this implementation of this whole new design beginning next July. So there's really 3 things. We did a strategy. November through June we'll begin a design, as Jeff just discussed, and then starting in July we'll start doing implementation. And I suspect, Carmen will shoot me if I get this wrong, that implementation will probably take about a year to fully implement all the design changes we'll want to talk about.
As you look at that student portal piece, or the portal, student and otherwise, will that involve data management system review and changes and teaching management systems? What will happen there?
Yes and yes. So what you're understanding as you look at this large picture is that there are systems underneath that student experience that either make it easier for them or harder for them to get from phase to phase. And as Jeff has mentioned, there are times where you do want it to be harder because they have to think through some things. And so you want some stickiness at points in the journey, but for the most part, you want it to be frictionless.
Sure.
And so in order to do that, we'll have to identify either new tools or new approaches or exposures of those tools so that they're not getting in the way of students. But as you saw, there's 50 systems and products underneath the experience that somehow all have to be brought into concert with each other, and that doesn't happen by happenstance. So a lot of planning, a lot of cross-collaboration amongst teams, and that's what's going to happen over the next 9 months to try and figure out how we want to do that.
Did you find that there was more struggles with the non-traditional student in going through the technology than the traditional student?
So we didn't focus specifically on the technology. That would be kind of a user experience lens, and we wanted to get a broader lens of like the experience over time. It may end up being the case that might be what my hypothesis would be. But it seems that there's a lot of struggle generally in a few specific hotspots along the journey that everyone's kind of having trouble with.
And if I may, this is this is a highly condensed version of a 90-page report that we just delivered, in which we do address some of the digital divides, if you will, that we need to be cognizant of.
Okay.
I like the journey part a whole lot. I got lost a little bit in the journey, but so if you guys can come back and keep us updated,
Right.
protocol, or prototypes that you're going to be doing, I think that'd be helpful for us to grasp this journey that you so well presented. Would help, I think, the board better understand how we're going to get from point A to point B.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.